3 out of 5 young people in America say their lives have little or no sense of purpose. Let that sink in for a moment. 3 out of 5. And a lot of this isn't young people's fault. They've been thrown into this brutal world of housing costs and algorithms and divisive politics. But what scares me is that this doesn't just seem like the normal adolescent angst that I went through in my 20s. Young people today who say they're struggling to find meaning also report much higher levels of mental health issues like anxiety and depression. So what do we do about it? And I say we deliberately here because I don't think the burden is all on young people. This is a problem we all helped create and we all need to fix. That's the focus of a new book by Harvard professor Arthur Brooks called The Meaning of Your Life. He spent years diving into the science of happiness and meaning, and he thinks he's found 6 steps that people can take to start to turn the tide on this crisis of purpose.
I've been seeing this ever since I've been back in academia. I left academia for about 11 years and I came back in 2019, and I found depression and anxiety had tripled while I was gone just during that decade. I started talking to a lot of young people, looking at a lot of data, of course, but what young people tell you, they keep saying the same words over and over again. They say, I don't know what I'm meant to do. My life feels meaningless. You find the depression scores are up by about a factor of 3, and anxiety has more than doubled since about 2008. This is exactly contemporaneous with the explosion in this sense of meaninglessness. And so ordinarily you'll find a kind of 5% of young people will say, I don't know the meaning of my life. And now it's 20%. And what we find is that this is just ravaging an entire generation. And that's what my new book is about, is the way to fix it.
So is it also, though, is there something in this that is about the promise in and of itself, the expectation in and of itself, that you were going to have a meaningful life if you got good grades and a good job? Was that pathway inherently misleading? That people thought if I did all of the right things, the social contract would mean that I would get rewards, and those rewards would be meaning. And actually, maybe it's not.
That's always been the bill of goods that's been sold. That if you have money, then you'll be happy. You'll be fulfilled. If you have power, you'll be happy and fulfilled. If you're famous, you'll be happy and fulfilled. And of course, people have always fallen for that. And here's the interesting thing about it, Katty. Here's the really ironic thing. Our grandparents, great grandpa, my great grandfather, Leroy Brooks, he never came home and said to my great grandmother, honey, I had a panic attack behind the mule today. And he didn't say that because his brain was working the way it was supposed to. His moment to moment life was pretty boring, but his life wasn't boring. Young people today, their moment to moment life has no boredom in it because of the devices and the culture, but their overall life is grindingly boring. When you get up in the morning and the first thing you do is you look at your phone, and then you go to work on a Zoom screen, and then you date by swiping right, and then your friends are all virtual, and then you game after work to get a sense of accomplishment. The problem is that's not a real life, that's a simulated life. When you simulate real life with technology, what's happening is you're getting kind of the AI version of a real life. And when people get a response, an AI generated response to an email, it makes them feel empty. It makes them feel cold. And the reason is because they haven't had communication with a real human being, and their brain knows. There's one thing you can't simulate, Katty, and that's the meaning of your life.
But is it also a lot to ask of young people who we know, I mean, we all see the data, you've seen it, it's harder for them to find jobs, there's a crisis of entry-level jobs, it's harder for them to pay their rent, and to say to them, okay, well, in those circumstances, actually finding meaning and purpose is just very difficult. I'm focused on trying to make ends meet at the moment.
Right. Yeah, for sure. But there's nothing new about that. The truth of the matter is that there's always been
Well,
trouble.
rents are higher for young people. Economic prospects are not great for young people.
Yeah, for sure. But we had different problems when in the 1970s and 80s when I was coming of age. In the 1980s, we were talking about the Cold War. We were talking about a different kind of environmental degradation. And we had a lot of resentment toward older people then too. And on the face of it, when you look at it, yeah, some things are harder and some things are easier. There's nothing new about these kinds of challenges. What is new is that our brains are working differently. Now, you and I can fall into this too. I mean, I have a phone and I'm on social media, so are you, but we remember the before times. And if you
Yeah.
grew up in a time where you never actually were able to use your brain hemispherically, right and left, the why complex side, the what and the how complicated side of all of these particular problems, and you're spending all your time on the left, you actually won't develop the skills to answer and even ask the meaning questions. That's the difference.
So you said there are the 6 ways that
Yes.
you can find
Yeah.
meaning. Give us some of the other solutions.
So the first way is actually to look at all of the philosophical and religious traditions for thousands of years that actually introduce the meaning of life. They all start with questions you can't answer. They all start with unanswerable questions. And so you find that the ancient Jewish tradition, the ancient Greeks had a whole school called aporia, which is inscrutability. It's questions that what they do is they make you ponder. It's like, hey, why do you love your wife? I mean, anything I say will sound stupid. The truth of the matter is I understand the answer to that question, but I struggle to articulate that. Any question that you can Google is not a meaning question. Any question that you can plug into AI, because AI will, if it gives you nonsense that's hilarious, that means you're on the right track. So I have a test that I give my students about whether or not they have a meaning crisis. That's 2 questions, and I'll give you the test now. Number 1, why are you alive? And there's a technical answer to that that has kind of a sperm and an egg, etc. But that's not the real reason. What is the metaphysical reason? Who created you? For what purpose? And the second question is, for what would you die right now? Now, for you and me, it's our kids and grandkids. When I talk to people my age and I push them to give a bigger answer than just your kids, then they start to think about the meaning of their lives in a different way. I say, for what idea? For what people who are not your family? For your country? What else would you die for? And just pondering that question opens up questions of meaning. That's aporia in the ancient Greek tradition, but in every tradition, and that's gone. That's been gone since 2008. People are not doing that. That's important. That's number 1, is ask more questions. Why questions?
Number 2?
Is love, is what we talked about. And actually the best way to do it is, I mean, it's not very helpful for me to say, "Hey, kids, go have kids." That's kind of impractical. Here's the best way to do it fast. Go give your heart away, which, by the way, is in wholesale decline among people under 30 years old today. People who are in their 20s today are a third less likely to say they're in love than people were when I was in my 30s, when I was in my 20s, I should say. I mean, when I was in my 20s, that's all I wanted. That's all I cared about. Everything else was incidental. I gotta pay my rent too, so I wanna
Yeah,
fall in love.
certainly grades and jobs were way down the list.
And by the way, getting your heart broken is also important for finding meaning.
So as a parent myself of children in that kind of age group, some of whom I think do have a sense of purpose and meaning, and others in my family I think are still struggling to find it. What advice or sense of hope do you give to parents of children of this age group?
So for parents, adults, aging parents of adult children, what I strongly recommend is actually talking about the things that matter as opposed to the things that don't matter. Stop asking them about and talking only about these technical, complicated things. Have more discussions about the things that really matter. Talk about romantic love. Never have them see you during meals on your phone, for Pete's sake. Talk
Mm.
more about transcendental ideas. Have them see you living your religious beliefs. Religion, by the way, is number 3, or spirituality or philosophy is number 3. Transcendence of yourself, above yourself. Talk about that. Now, when I talk about transcendence or religious belief, there are other ways to do that as well. Transcendence comes from potentially reading the Stoic philosophers and living according to their dictates. Maybe it's studying the works of Johann Sebastian Bach and standing in awe of the greatest composer who ever lived. Practicing the Brahma Muhurta of walking for an hour before dawn without devices. And just doing that will change people's lives, because that gives you a profound sense of meaning, whether you're an atheist or a Buddhist or something in between.
Do you think we'll sort this out? Do you think we're heading into a generation, um, now the next generation beyond people, kids in their teens, who are actually going to start realizing that they are being controlled by this and it's destroying their life and their relationships? That my source of hope is that we're going to get younger kids who say, this is not doable. This is not the route to happiness for any of us. And so we are going to take back control of our time and our thought process.
I think that is going to happen. And our young people today are being productized. They're being productized by the technologies that actually are specifically being created to addict them. And their misery is of no import, quite frankly. But young people are going to fight back. And sooner or later, young people, and I already see the trends starting to change in the data, Young people are changing their relationship with their devices for precisely that reason. My own kids have a much better, my kids are 22, 20, 25, and 27, and they have a better relationship with their devices than people who are a little bit older than they are. So I'm very bullish on the future. I just don't want to lose a generation in the process.
Arthur Brooks, the book is The Meaning of Your Life. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Katty.